Hello and welcome to the Crypto Sky podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Today we've got another awesome episode. I recently conducted an interview with Potato McGruff, aka the CEO of DOGE. For those of you who are not familiar with him, Potato is a crypto trader, a network engineer, and a member of the United States Navy. He's a really awesome dude, and I really enjoyed being able to talk to him and interview him for the podcast. Also, he has a daughter who is currently fighting Down syndrome. Her name is Clara. If you would like to help, there are a couple ways you can do so. You can follow her on Twitter at Clara Crypto and show your support there. And you can also donate your crypto to Clara through the addresses pinned on her profile. I'll make sure to link Potato's Twitter and Clara's Twitter in the show notes below so you guys can show them a lot of love and support. That's all for the intro. Let's get into the interview. All right, Potato McGruff, I'd like to thank you for joining the Crypto Sky podcast and like to welcome you.
Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. And like I said, this is my very first podcast, and I'm pretty excited to be a part of it.
Definitely. All right, so let's get into it. So I just kind of want you to tell us how you got into crypto.
So I got into crypto a little shy of a year now. I got involved right about May of 2017. So coming up on my 1 year anniversary, and I got into it actually through some friends who were talking about it. Just some casual conversation back and forth, and it was actually getting real close to when Litecoin was going to implement SegWit, and when that was coming up, they started talking about it, and they were feeding me on these moonshot, it's going to go to $700 million next week, sort of thing. And so I got the bug to look into it and figure out what was going on. So I signed up on Coinbase and started buying stuff, and here I am still mixed into it.
Awesome, man. So kind of tell us what really drew you in. Was it money, or was it being able to talk with your friends? What captured you?
I've always been into technology in general, and while honestly, when I first got started, I didn't know anything about blockchain or anything like that. I know about cryptography only because in my day job I work for a cybersecurity company, so I had an idea of how the cryptology side of things worked, but it was purely money for starters. And as I got into it more and I started talking with folks and researching into it, I developed an actual love for the craft behind of things.
Okay, definitely. So you mentioned you have a technology background. Do you have an investing background as well, or was it something new to you?
Now, this was completely new, minus randomly and blindly throwing money into my 401k at work. In some stocks and bonds that are 7-10 year bonds or whatever. No prior background investing at all.
Okay, so kind of take us through the process of you learning crypto and learning investing.
Sure, and that's a good thing. I want to piggyback off of what my last statement was, is I think it's very important for new folks to keep in mind when they get involved in the space, is you see a Twitter personality, maybe like me or anybody who's out there, you really don't know their background or what they're doing. And one of the articles I wrote, I kind of really stressed that point, is that you don't know what somebody knows, and so you really got to do your own research in this space. And I know that phrase gets thrown around constantly, but man, you really got to get into that. So back to your original question, though, for how I kind of went through this. So I got started with my buddies, and I really got onto Poloniex is where I got started. It initially took all of my learning from Trollbox when it was still a thing, and you can imagine how terrible that probably was. So as I got further and further into it, then I got led to Twitter. As I got on Twitter, I started following some of these different personalities, and then I got involved with, at the time, Wolf of Poloniex, now Wolf rebranded, I think he is, or whatever the hell his Twitter account is. He's still a good friend of mine, and I owe a lot to that guy for even being where I am. And so getting involved with him, I kind of fell into a good group of, some real popular names within crypto, and I got to sponge off those guys and learn. I think, you see so much on Twitter of folks that are screaming win Lambo, win Target and stuff like that, that it was a little refreshing when I came in there just asking how and wanting to learn and like providing charts to them and saying, hey, give me feedback, that I kind of just kept growing off of that. And eventually I became a moderator for the Wolfpack. Wolfpack got rebranded into Bitcoin Masons. And so I've stuck with it ever since. And I've got to piggyback in a couple other different communities and here and there, but definitely my main community that I hang out with is the Bitcoin Masons group now.
Okay. And you mentioned your article. That's actually something I wanted to bring up. Your one on Hacker Moon, is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
So kind of just talk about how you got inspiration to write that, and then just kind of tell us your main points in that article.
So with that, I'm working on a second article now too, which I keep saying it'll be done anytime, but it's whenever I finally get off my ass and do it the rest of the way. But anyway, so the initial inspiration for that is, I don't know how much you know or the community that be listening knows of my personal story, but I've been pretty open about the hospital stuff that's been going on with my daughter and my the pregnancy and a lot of the stuff through that. So as I sat around in the hospital room, a lot of times, under stress and worried, it was a good outlet for me to kind of detach for a little bit from the situation and focus on something I enjoyed. I've always enjoyed writing. And so it was a way for me to kind of reflect on my own journey, if you will, and look back at my mistakes that I've made and try to present those in a readable format. So hopefully somebody who's just now getting started can read that and be like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that.
Okay, definitely. And you mentioned your daughter. If you don't mind just kind of sharing your story and also
Yeah.
her short story.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate that. And so I made her a little Twitter account called Clara Crypto. Um, the premise behind that initially was, like I said, I really kind of used Twitter and all of that as a venting tool to kind of like I said, get some stuff off my chest. And as you're standing in the middle of that storm with your wife, and I got a 5-year-old son as well. You can't really kind of show sometimes those emotions in those circumstances. So it was a good space for me to be able to do that and kind of let that out and then return back to it with my family. Also, I hope Twitter's still around when she's older, and if so, at that time I will turn the account over to her, and she can look back too, and kind of see almost a journal, if you will, of what my thoughts were and kind of what we were going through in a timeline with pictures, and she can see the community responses behind it. I just thought it was kind of a cool idea to maybe be able to give that to her one day, and something we can kind of all reflect back on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea. I really think that's neat. And something I've kind of really been shocked by is how welcoming most of the crypto community is and how supportive they are.
More than some of my personal friends, and yes, and
Yep.
so it's absolutely amazing as well. um, Realistically, you get on Twitter and the internet and you expect maybe you'll see tons of trolls and crazy stuff. I mean, and there's only been maybe one or two like posts that have kind of rubbed me the wrong way or whatever. I have a pretty thick skin, and I grew up in the era of the internet, if you will, and so trolls don't usually get to me in any way. And so even with my daughter, I can look at it and just say it's just some a-hole on the internet. And like I said, I really didn't get that, and I was expecting it, and kind of tried to build a psychological wall ready for that. And so it never happened. And like I said, nothing but pure support. I had people, reach out from all over the world. I had a guy, I won't say his name only because I don't know if he wants me to, but he lives in Australia, and in Australia they don't collect tips at a restaurant, or they don't usually do, because they live enough wage that in the U.S. they need tips. But regardless, he put out a tip jar and collected money for her, and then sent me, he turned it into crypto and sent it to me. And these are people I've never met before in any way, shape, or form, and I'm just some guy with a Doge avatar online talking about his life. And so it was really touching. I had people send us flowers and reach out and all kinds of stuff, man. It was really, really cool to see how the community came about.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is really cool. And you mentioned Doge. Kind of tell us how you got the nickname CEO of DOGE.
So back in October, I think it was, maybe, um, yeah, maybe end of September, but that's semantics. Regardless, I was looking and really starting to get away from being more of a day trader and more into a swing trader. Um, I just don't have the time to day trade a lot and kind of babysit the charts. So I started to get more into looking for, things that are in a big market cycle. You just posted a chart not too long ago where it was like a perfect example of that, where you have that really high peak, the drop down, the accumulation floor, and then it's going to take off again here soon.
Yep,
So
ICX, yeah.
yeah, Doge was in that phase at the time. And I've always been a goofball and I like the memes and everything like that. And so Doge fits very well with that. So I used to have an avatar of that same outfit, but it was a dolphin. And I just started chilling Doge and I started chilling that chart. And people were telling me I was crazy. It's not going to take off. It's like, look, the market cycle doesn't care what your feelings are on it. If something gets cheap enough, and previously it's been 500% above that, people will buy it because they think it'll do it again. So, and then because it's Doge, I just think it's funny. So, somebody made me that avatar. And when they made me that avatar, I just added onto the end of my name the CEO of DOGE, and it kind of stuck. And I really kind of got a little bit of a cult following after that too of Dogians, and I mean, I don't know how many times I've had to countlessly tell people like, I'm not the CEO of Doge, not to mention that role does not exist in real life. But if you want to keep calling me it, sure. I had it in my profile at one point that like I have no affiliation with real Doge other than just screaming about it constantly. So
Oh, that's funny. All right, so you can kind of piggyback off your article. Just kind of give your tips to someone who's new to crypto and wants to start investing. What would be the three major things you would tell them?
sure. And the biggest thing I think that I had to learn was if you don't know why you just bought a coin, if you don't have a plan, or if you don't have any kind of inkling of even why you hit the buy button, minus a guy in a Doge avatar said to, you're gambling. You're not, trading. Once you get into that lifestyle, you can find you'll lose your money very, very quickly because you just don't know where a legitimate time to sell or buy, or it's broken a support, or you don't even necessarily have to do your own TA because you can go on TradingView and look up a coin, and there's countless of other people that are posting charts all day of TA for a coin you might be interested in, but you have to know if it's BS or not, and learning that side of it's what's very, very important. Um, I also learned really a lot of times if you don't know what you're doing either, holding can be like investing, I should say, as opposed to holding, can be very, very beneficial. My very first bear market, my mother-in-law, who just bought Bitcoin on Coinbase, had more Bitcoin than me at one point because I kept just trading my stuff away and losing it. And so that also leads me to what my next point would be: is you don't always have to make trades. So, you hear the common phrase that sometimes the best trade is the one not made. So I think that's also a very valid point to put out. And I kind of already said it already, but be careful too who you follow on Twitter, and just keep in mind that X amount of followers does not mean they're suddenly credible. I found in my journey of Twitter followers, the more I get, the faster I seem to accumulate them. I think it's that psychological effect too of, oh, hey, this guy must be legitimate because X amount of people follow him. I need to follow him too. And then, you kind of get that echo chamber effect. That's the last point I would bring up, would be the echo chamber, which is what bit me right off the bat too, was when I think it was Digibit was the very first one that bit me, and it might have been Ripple, but either way, I got into troll box there, and just a whole bunch of people were screaming about a specific coin, and so I bought it. It was at the tip of its market cycle. It crashed, and I lost a bunch of money. And I will add one more little point on there too for things in general is security. And I think that's something that's very, very under stressed to people, is to use two-factor authentication, get away from SMS authentication, use the actual tokenized two-factor, bookmark your exchanges so you don't get hit with phishing. Although they've just removed the ability for a lot of crypto ads on Google and stuff like that, so that should help out. But don't click any links from people you don't know. Don't send people 0.1 ETH and expect to get 100 back. All that kind of stuff.
Definitely. And something you mentioned in your article is market psychology. Kind of go deeper into how that actually does affect the price of a certain coin.
So market psychology in terms of you have FOMO and you have FUD is kind of the grand scale of things I think you kind of see, but um, people will, they see the big green candle and they will dive into it, continue to push it up, 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 and up, and or you can have an event that FUDs it and drops it into the earth. But in terms of like going back to Doge, which I spoke about. Markets kind of go in those big waves, and you see that common stock market Wall Street psychology chart that if I had a dollar every time it was posted, I wouldn't be doing crypto anymore. Um, but if I mean, it does have a lot of merit to it, though, and um, when you see these different cycles, um, you can read them on all these different charts. Your chart you posted was almost matching to the T with it, and there's a reason why you see that chart so much. Um, I think it's important too that unless you're an investor, don't get too loyal to a coin. And it's like I was mentioning before with my Doge chart. People were saying, "Well, it's Doge. What does it do? Why do we even care?" I say, I don't care what it does per se. I care about the market cycle. It has gone from its all-time high to its now all-time low. Why not buy it? There's literally basically no risk to it. Hold it until it turns around and launches again one day. And I have made much, much, much more money with that strategy than I ever did trying to day trade. And so that's kind of my nutshell of market psychology.
Okay. And something I've kind of picked up as I've really started to dive into crypto is when things line up is when you really see price either increase or decrease. And what I mean by that is a chart plus maybe good news coming in the next few weeks
Sure.
and plus good sentiment. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, without a doubt. And so there's the Coin Market Calendar website you can go to. You can search for a specific coin, and you can see, they're all community submitted events, but you can see for a specific coin if there is something coming up. And so, yeah, if you've got things like airdrops, token burns, forks, things like that, that tends to drive the market up as people want those things. You've got to be very careful though, because now a lot of people in crypto know that drives things up, so they will play off of that FOMO that comes into it. And so a lot of times you'll have to make a decision on what's more important to you, is getting the airdropped coin or riding the pre-event pump up and then jumping off before the event happens. You hear the common phrase, buy the rumor, sell the news. And I think that's very, very true, because a lot of times once an event comes out, you will see a coin drop dramatically. Normally, I think it's much more lucrative to ride the trade as opposed to whatever the event's outcome is, whether that be the token burn or new coins or whatever.
Okay, definitely. And so you mentioned earlier you were previously a day trader, but you've kind of been making that transition to a swing trader. Kind of tell us your investing strategy today and kind of how you go about trades.
So, um, a really good example was recently Storm. I got into Storm shortly after it listed on Binance. One of the reasons why I did that, though, is because I waited till it cooled down from its initial pump. I knew that once it got added to Binance, it was going to blow up and it was going to go crazy, and it did. Once it came down to a floor where it looked like it accumulated, I figured most investors will probably be doing about the same thing that I was and looking for an entry into this new coin that's been added to Binance. So I did. I bought it in around 250 sats and sat on it. And it did drop even lower than that. Dropped to like, I think 215 might have been the lowest before it took off. But regardless, I bought in that area and sat on it, and then it blew up. That's one of the things I look for, and that's more event driven. The other thing I look for is, like I said, the big market cycle swings where you see those gigantic falling wedges. OAX just had that today. Was one of the coins that I'd got into just a day or two ago, because if you looked at its chart, it just had a huge falling wedge on it, and it looked like it was starting to work its way up to the edge of it. It may break out. I got into it, it broke out, and I got a cool like 25% off of it before I jumped out of it. That's my favorite strategy, and what I really like to look for is those big market cycle. Something's pumped crazily to its all-time high, and now it's all the way back down to its bottom accumulation floor. A coin like ADA right now is another one that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, as kind of that field. Really, a lot of coins are starting to look that way, which makes me really excited. And there's giant falling wedges everywhere. So I know there's always that phrase that it's about to be alt season or it's alt season now, and you can get a little burnt out on it. But I think I put on my Twitter I was cautiously optimistic right now about it.
Okay. And so you mentioned, the different coins you're keeping an eye on. Do you prefer microcaps or do you prefer more large caps?
I prefer large caps, but I won't stay away from microcaps. It just depends on what exchange it's on and kind of the volume involved with it. Because I also don't want to get, I don't want to buy something and not be able to get out of it either. So I definitely don't play nearly as much with the micro caps. Like I don't have a Cryptopia account. I used to have. Well, I guess I technically do. I just haven't logged into it forever. But I pretty much stick around on Binance nowadays. And so if you can find it on there, I'll basically trade it.
Okay. And so kind of give us your idea on the overall market sentiment right now, where many people believe we may be starting to become bullish, where we've been in a bearish trend for so long.
So I am a believer that in due time, in the grand scheme of time, that yes, Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. I don't think John McAfee's that insane. I think he's insane for his bet, but I don't think his predictions are really that crazy off. So I do think that we will see some action here, maybe in the next few months or so, of Bitcoin starting to take off again. What I'm hoping and what I'm starting to see sentiment-wise within the community is a lot of people are starting to get excited about alts again. So I'm hoping maybe what we see is for the next 2 to 3 months, we start to see an alt season, like a legitimate one that boosts all this stuff up, similar to 2017's. Once that cools down and things stop, same thing. We see towards the end of 2017 where then Bitcoin goes crazy, and maybe that's the trend we'll start to see from now on. It's it's hard to tell what the future shows, but maybe we'll have a nice alt season, BTC parabolic activity, then bear market, and rinse and repeat. So again, cautiously optimistic about an alt season, but really excited and looking at opportunities and definitely planting my my little eggs everywhere.
Okay. So kind of touch on how you personally trade or invest in a bearish market versus how you would trade and invest in a bullish market.
Bullish market, buy everything you can and wait because it's going to take off eventually. And a little bit more precise on that. So I don't like to get in more than maybe, if I'm holding more than 5 coins to 6 coins, that's usually outside my normal. I know some people get like 40, 50 crazy little coins. I just don't like to manage all that stuff. So if I even had more than 10, I think that'd be surprising. Regardless, so I buy 5 coins, 10 coins, whatever. I sit in those and wait. When coin 1 pops and takes off, I sell off a good chunk of that, take those profits and distribute it between coins 2 through 10 and kind of keep cycling that money into the things that haven't popped yet. And I'll always leave a little bit of a bag behind kind of for long-term trades in a bull market. In a bearish market, I typically don't touch alts in any way, shape, or form. I do not margin trade, and that's mostly because I'm not good at it, I guess, or I mean, I'm just not familiar enough with it or comfortable enough with it to get near it, and I know you can lose your ass very quickly. So I just short things. I'll get on GDAX, and as you can see the trends or the waves maybe Bitcoin's making or whatever, I'll play at the big 3 on GDAX and just kind of short and buy back between that.
Okay, definitely. And you mentioned you do most of your trading on Binance, and a recent coin that was listed as Wanchain. Kind of give us your thoughts on Wanchain.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know much about it as far as a coin itself, but nonetheless, as a trader, As I had mentioned previously with Storm, uh, if I think anything new gets added to an exchange, there's just an immediate sentiment attention placed on it that you can use to be profitable. Um, Storm also went bananas though because I believe shortly after it got listed on Upbit, which certainly pumped it quite a bit. But nonetheless, so like Wanchain, you could ride it up if it just got posted on there, if you previously owned it, and then wait for the initial excitement to wear off. It's going to retrace and accumulate some, and then it's probably going to turn around and bounce right back up again. I think a lot of times those kind of start to form Elliott waves, and you can ride something like that up.
Okay, so kind of talk about what sector you believe or you're most bullish on in 2018. Is there maybe a decentralized exchanges or privacy coins? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do always think privacy coins in general are going to be very hot, especially as more and more time goes on, as there's more and more fear of regulation and everything like that. I think, you can't expect not to have privacy coins somewhere in the mix of crypto or even in our future world organizations, if you will. I do think privacy coins will always be very bullish, in a long-term sense. And it's something I kind of always keep an eye on there. For other things, granted, I do like Storm, not just because it pumped up and everything like that, but I like the idea behind it. It's a gamification platform, so basically you can utilize it to take your product and reward people for like kind of playing a game aspect in Storm, and so that's kind of cool too. I think that's a very interesting aspect. Otherwise, I kind of don't track a whole lot of fundamental things like that. I do here and there, or I kind of read news on things, but otherwise, I'm usually just kind of trading just to get more Bitcoin and then kind of ride Bitcoin up.
Okay, definitely. So something I feel like a lot of new people in crypto struggle with is whether to join a paid group or not. Kind of give us your thoughts on that.
So it's no secret if you read my article or my tweets that I have been involved in a paid group since, I mean, it had to be within the first month maybe of crypto. And I signed up with what at the time was the Wolfpack. Um, I don't think I would be where I am today without that. Certainly not without kind of getting the connections I did working with Wolf. And so I became a moderator pretty early within his Wolfpack, mostly just because I asked him if he needed the help. And he said, yeah, go ahead. And that put me kind of behind the curtain with him and some of the other bigger names that were working with it. And so that networking just kind of branched me out and really helped me in the crypto space. That's also a very big thing I'd point out is everybody should be networking. You'd be amazed at all the different opportunities out there. And a lot of it can be a who you know sort of thing. Back to the original point though, I think at the end of the day, if you don't pay for a paid group, you're gonna pay in experience, if you will. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna lose money in that aspect. If you're with a paid group, you're obviously paying a monthly fee or whatever it is, but you have a community that you trust because you gave them money in that aspect. So you think they have some form of credibility to bounce your questions off of or your actions off of before you do them, which may save you more money in the long run. Each person has to weigh that and make that decision of where they're going to lose more money. And if they're a seasoned investor, then they may not need a paid group, but they just may be new to crypto. So I do think a lot of people kind of give them a bad rap, and you should certainly try to find a group, regardless if it's paid or not, and just be involved in a community where you can still bounce things off of, and you can trade with other folks. And like I said, you just got to be very careful not to get involved in those echo chambers where everybody in there is named Ripple or something, and you're like, oh, okay, well, obviously you guys are bullish on Ripple no matter what. So
Definitely. Okay, so in your mind, what are the biggest obstacles long term for mass crypto adoption?
the approachability of it, I think. And so, like, let's say I'd mentioned to you earlier that my mother-in-law owns some crypto because of me, and she struggles at times, even just for like Coinbase or we've tried to get her on Polynex, and that was a nightmare, when it comes to two-factor authentication and things like that. And that's not necessarily the exchange's fault, but just the average Joe, as I mentioned too, I work in IT. You have people that don't know how to turn on a computer monitor at times, and you're trying to get them involved in now what can be at times a complex environment, also a very what's the word? I'm looking for scamming environment, I guess you could say, or people take advantage of you in the environment. So you got to be careful of that aspect of it. There's a lot of social engineering is probably what I'm looking more for in the environment. And so I think until we kind of get this 100% cleaned up mainstream, you won't see the mass adoption. With that, though, with like Circle purchasing Polynex gives them a lot more power and a lot more credibility, I think, in the mainstream eyes too, which is a good thing. And they can, give them the resources to make a better platform that might be more approachable, because Coinbase is pretty easy to get your money into at the end of the day in the grand scheme of it. But for the average Joe to get their money off of Coinbase and get into Polynex, Binance, Bitrex, most people don't know how to do that. And if they don't have a friend who can kind of walk them through it the first time, they don't know what the hell a Bitcoin address is or how to send that stuff or, whatever else. And there's a lot of, I think, intimidation behind that.
Okay. And you mentioned a friend. What are some ways us as community members can kind of help bring new people in and help knock down those obstacles for them?
So things like this, a podcast, I think is certainly good because somebody can listen into it. And you need the different kind of formats as well, too, like an article, the YouTube videos, the different things like that, and awareness, letting people know that the stuff exists. Because there is tons and tons of information and tutorials and all these different things, but people don't know where to get it necessarily. Well, I spent a lot of time in the military, and one of the things I was always taught when I worked in operations for it was you don't have to know every answer. You just have to know where to find it. And so getting people those resources and knowing where they are. So, hey, you know what, today, I think that might be an Elliott wave on that chart. You know what, let me go look it up on this such and such resource. So one of the things I really like is Investopedia. And so I'll take phrases and things like that I'm not familiar with. I'll Google that phrase with Investopedia on the end of it and find an article I can read on it or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. Okay, so kind of tell us just how you manage your lifestyle with trading and with your daughter and with certain things.
So, yes, so I work a full-time job. I go to school full-time. I have a wife, a 5-year-old, a newborn. I'm still in the Navy Reserves, and I have a partridge in a pear tree also. So there's plenty of stuff going on in my life. But with that, I can still find time for crypto, either mobily, so when I have that little bit of downtime. But again, even more why I trend trade as opposed to day trade. I just don't have the time, and that's okay. You could still make a lot of money by finding something with the trend, that big falling wedge on such and such coin, place your buy, get it in there, and then set alarms. Have your stop loss in there, set an alarm to alert your phone when it breaks X barrier you're looking for, and then it gets your attention. You can look at it and you can make your decision from there from what you want to do. And if you're buying these things that are these bigger long-term trades like that, it's okay if you don't have a lot of time because you don't have to dedicate a whole lot of time to it. And then, whenever you do have some free time, do some charts. Or, like I said, nowadays you can just get on TradingView and look at other people's charts. You just have to make sure they're not BSing you about it. So I think it's become a lot more approachable in that aspect.
Okay. So outside of all those things you mentioned, what are some activities that you enjoy or what do you do for fun?
I'm a big gamer.
Okay.
I do enjoy getting on Steam or my PS4 if I have time. I used to PC game a lot more, but now that I have the baby, I'm usually sitting in the living room with her or something like that. But if she's sleeping, I can pick up the PS4 controller and and play some games that way. I do enjoy taking my son out and doing some outside activities, whether that's just running around, going to a playground, something like that. And I really am a big astronomy fan. I love space news, things like that in general. And so where I live on 4 acres of land. right like in the middle, like cornfields and soybeans and stuff. And so it gets dark. There's no light pollution really out here. So I can get out there with a telescope and take a look at things and stuff. And I've always enjoyed that too.
That's really cool. All right, so I kind of want to close with these last 2 points. Where do you see the overall crypto space being in 5 to 10 years, and where do you personally want to be in 5 to 10 years?
So, where do I expect the space to be in 5 to 10 years? I do think that we'll still be, unless there's some kind of insane mega regulations slapped down on the space. Continued maximum growth. We will keep going up. I think I read a statistic recently that only like 8% of the world currently is, involved in crypto. We're still in an infancy, if not maybe a toddler stance. And even if it's not Bitcoin per se, blockchain's not going away. I think that genie's out of the bottle, and you're going to see that implemented throughout the world, just like we did back in the internet days when that first came out. I think that will completely revolutionize the technology that we interact with every day, and it's just finding the pieces like after the dot-com crash that survive it and those projects that are legitimate and to hang out with them. So where do I want to be in 5 to 10 years? I'm hoping by that time I am retired from my 9 to 5. So my real goal, though, is first to pay off all my debt, pay off my house, my cars, credit cards, all that stuff like that, and still leave a good like 3-4 years of salary in my my trading portfolio, so I have some cushion in case something goes wrong, and I might even drop to like part-time work before I fully quit out. But really, the big goal is once I hit my first goal is to pull out enough monies to pay everything off. So regardless if this thing does tank, I've at least taken care of my family. We can live a much more comfortable life.
Okay, awesome, man. Well, that's all the questions I have. I'll kind of let you give your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. This being specifically my first podcast. I hope to do some more. And like I said, you're welcome to have me back anytime.
That's all for the interview. I think this was really an awesome episode, and I really enjoyed talking to Potato about everything crypto and about his personal story and some of the challenges him and his daughter have faced. I really hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed talking to Potato. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a couple things you can do. You can share it with your friends and family, and you can leave a review on iTunes and make sure you subscribe. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next week.